Howdy y'all, welcome back. Thank you for being here. Today, our subject is Thanksgiving. For many of us, especially here in America, we have a basic understanding of what Thanksgiving is and why our nation celebrates it. But one thing we don't ever really talk about are the inner workings of how the holiday of Thanksgiving came to be and who were the people who orchestrated this event. So from a layman's perspective, that is what I will attempt to do today, albeit I will also view the history through the lens of the old world, hoping to find anything that overlaps or stands out to me as extremely interesting or unexpected. If you guessed that Thanksgiving has ties to the esoteric, you've hit the nail right on the head. The United States holiday of Thanksgiving is celebrated on the fourth Thursday in November and can range in date from the 22nd to the 28th of that month. This was only uniformly accepted as the date of the national holiday in 1941, at the height of World War II. Before this, Thanksgiving was celebrated on different dates regionally across the United States. The understanding of Thanksgiving as an American national holiday is said to date back to 1863, at the height of the Civil War. The glossed over version will tell us that the first recurring Thanksgiving celebration dates to the Plymouth colony, the first permanent English colony in New England. The colony, established in 1620 in southeast Massachusetts by settlers from the Mayflower, then celebrated a 1621 meeting with the indigenous people of the area, who are said to have taught the English settlers the ways to conquer America and survive a harsh winter. By 1623, we're told the settlers of the Plymouth colony then began an annual celebration to pay tribute to their indigenous saviors. Through hundreds of years of practice and adjustment, these New England celebrations then became countrywide beliefs, as most of America was conquered or inherited from different indigenous groups. However, there's also deeper facets to this. One being, even the convoluted current narrative has many holes within it, the most glaring being that the indigenous leader who is given credit in the narrative as ordering his people to protect and feed the settlers of Plymouth is known as Squanto in the myth, but has a real counterpart identified as Tisquantum. Tisquantum was captured by the English in 1614, well before the landing at Plymouth, and Tisquantum was sold into slavery, not in America, but rather he was shipped overseas to construct cities in Spain. Again, we have to ask, how much of this can actually be believed? But we are then told that Tisquantum, while enslaved in Europe, had his freedom purchased by Franciscan friars, who focused on educating the indigenous Tisquantum and teaching him English. Tisquantum then, somehow, left the monastery he was educated at, gained safe passage back to America, and he just so happened to find a ship that was heading directly for his previous homeland. Do you know what his homeland was? Plymouth, aka Patuxent. That's right, it all comes full circle here. We're told Tisquantum arrived back to his fortified indigenous settlement to find that his people had been decimated by disease and his settlement had been taken over by the same English who had captured and sold him just a few years earlier. Tisquantum then rose to infamy as he brokered peace between the indigenous people of New England and the English colonists. And Tisquantum plays a special role in the history books because he was one of the first indigenous translators. After establishing trade routes, essentially for the English to reach the indigenous, the narrative concludes that Tisquantum also got whatever disease had affected the rest of his tribe, and he too passed away. So again, while this isn't necessarily mainstream, this is still the current narrative. We're told an indigenous leader of New England was captured in New England by the English 6 years before the English even had a permanent settlement there. The English then sold Tisquantum into slavery in Spain, but he was eventually purchased by Franciscan friars who educated him in English. Tisquantum then somehow earned safe passage back to America to the exact location where he was captured, a fortified village that just so happened to be his homeland that was built by his people. When he arrived back to America, his village was either gone and rebuilt, as the narrative says, or it had just been inherited by the Europeans. The rest of his tribe was said to have passed away due to European diseases, and instead of being angry or scared of being captured again, we're told Tisquantum then brokered trade routes and fresh food for the English settlers, basically giving them all the means they needed to survive, and then Tisquantum quietly passes away, and with him goes the entire history of his people and their fortress at Plymouth. Does that sound about right? Furthermore, and it usually is right on the surface if we know where to look, but Thanksgiving, or the giving of thanks to deities, leaders, and higher powers, is a practice that has been in place since before Roman times and was often tied back to sacrifice. According to modern theologists, ancient religious holidays are divided into days of humiliation and days of thanksgiving. In the Old Testament, for example, there are numerous Thanksgiving days that are mentioned, including those of the prophet Noah, King Hezekiah, prophet Nehemiah, King David, and the prophet Daniel, just to name the most substantial. Again, these days of thanks are often associated with the blessings that the days of humiliation prepared the people for, as in, the days of humiliation often included sacrifice, while the days of thanks included bounty. The first national days of prayer, or national holidays of thanks, celebrated by an entire kingdom, can be seen as happening in England as early as the year 1009, when Roman days of worship were converted into Christian ones. Beginning in the 15th century and peaking in the 16th century, these days of thanks in England took a bit of a darker turn, as they were said to have involved intense fasting, which became a favorite pastime of the Puritans. These somber days of thanks in England were said to be in response to the plague crisis, and yet in these dark traditions, we're told, the American holiday was born. However, others claim that is simply not true. For example, modern evidence suggests that some sort of esoteric Thanksgiving celebration was held by fishermen and indigenous people in the land that would become Canada as early as 1579. Many point to that event as truly being the precursor to modern Thanksgiving. The question becomes, if these celebrations really did occur roughly 500 years ago, how esoteric do we believe these events really were? I highly doubt it was strictly a nice to meet you dinner between new friends. And when we look at esoteric America, one city that should not be forgotten is St. Augustine, Florida. According to Professor Michael Gannon and other researchers, St. Augustine was named such as it was founded on the feast day of St. Augustine. This is believed to be fact. However, more interesting is that this evidence appears to suggest the landing at St. Augustine was accompanied by a massive esoteric ritual to grant the Spanish dominion, and many now suggest that there's a more nefarious tie between the friars and the inheriting of indigenous history. When the Spanish landed in St. Augustine, they stayed in massive domed houses created by the indigenous people. We're told a form of Thanksgiving was held in St. Augustine, some sort of ceremony, every year since then. However, it gets even stranger. We're told the Virginia Company ordered a Thanksgiving Day be celebrated by the year 1607, a full 13 years before the landing at Plymouth, Massachusetts. But the narrative doesn't elaborate on this, besides saying there's evidence a ceremony of thanks was held annually in Jamestown, Virginia, Virginia's first settlement, and this began by 1610. Oddly, this was law under the London Company, also known as the Virginia Company of London. Furthermore, the English, at least those who settled in America, did not first land in Plymouth, or even in New England at all. I've covered this before, but the Virginia Company of London specifically targeted the Susquehannock lands as they wanted to establish trade routes with whom they deemed to be the most powerful indigenous people at that time. In 1607, the year Thanksgiving was first ordered under Virginia-London law. The English landed in the Chesapeake Bay, the entirety of which was said to be under the control of the Susquehannock indigenous people. Do you know who is depicted on the first London map of Virginia? A Susquehannock giant. Today, the site of the first landing is much closer to Virginia Beach than it is to New England. And upon traveling up the Susquehanna River, which empties into the Chesapeake, the English discovered numerous fortified towns, all built by the Susquehannock people, including one near Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was said to be completely fortified, built up on all sides with wooden palisades on top of intricate earthworks, and the Susquehannock there were said to be in possession of at least one bronze cannon, leading Captain John Smith of the English to claim he had discovered an ancient, advanced civilization. Do you know what the Susquehannock then introduced to the European man? Tobacco became the largest cash crop in the world, and the Virginia Company of London became one of the richest companies of all time, all based off the plant the Susquehannock people had introduced to them. Do you know what the English name for the Susquehannock was? Conestoga. And do you know what the first name of a cigar was? A stogie. Is that a coincidence? No. As much thanks as we give for surviving the tough winters in Massachusetts and other tales that touch our souls, the truth of the matter is the London Company of Virginia made trade deals with the most powerful indigenous leaders whom had already established large and mostly fortified villages in America, which the London Company essentially rented or bought out. But eventually, through whatever means, probably nefarious, it appears the Europeans never gave these towns back to the indigenous or never gave the indigenous the full credit that they deserve. Thus, Thanksgiving, in my opinion, is very much tongue-in-cheek symbolism and represents the compartmentalization of the true nature of American history.